And let's start with the big thing that, as Dan said, everyone talks about on the news. It's everywhere you see it. I'm sure some of you even believe it. Digital gold. You see Sailor on the front of Forbes, was it, today? And he's big mug all over X and Nostra. Digital gold is the prevailing narrative. It has been the prevailing narrative. And one of the things that we have seen in Bitcoin and development is you can go back, right? Maybe it's apps with Ross now pardoned and free, but you started in illicit markets. There were then the mainstream organizations that jumped on board. Some of those then subsequently pivoted away. And people kind of went, Bitcoin payments are done. Let's go and move on to other means. And it's a bit of a false narrative, that. And the reason it's a false narrative is the technology that was at play 10 years ago is dramatically different. I imagine everyone in your lives now uses tech that wasn't even here a couple of years ago. And I think basically what we're trying to get to in the report is discussing that evolution means that kind of argument has gone. The technology we now have enables you to do things that you can't do with traditional payment methods. And kind of through learning through the report, we've kind of got to this place where I'm really excited. I don't know if anyone's on the spaces. I think I said it about 16 times about how excited I am. And that's not just because I work in this or passionate about Bitcoin. It's because I see something radically different to what we have. And I'm not saying that as a shill of Bitcoin either. I think there are areas we all need to improve on. And one of those is the narrative. But overall, just calling it digital gold doesn't really cut it. And I think, Dan, in the report you mentioned, you kind of referenced why that kind of narrative doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin's really hard to explain to normal people. Most normal people don't necessarily care about peer-to-peer or censorship resistance or a lot of the things that us Bitcoiners like to care about or talk about in the back of a Bitcoin bar. And having that sort of helpful analogy to something that they can get their heads around gets them sort of 50% of the way there, which is better than zero. But it also is quite limiting, right? Bitcoin does share a lot of things with gold, particularly the limited supply, the hard money, the hard to mine and create portions of it. But really, if you stop there and you just think this is a scarce asset that's a hedge or an asset they want to buy and hold long term because number will go up, then you're missing, in my opinion, the forest for the trees of what the real potential of this is. And like the internet did for information, Bitcoin can do for money. And Bitcoin is an internet native bearer instrument that has never existed before, that people still don't really understand. And that we'll touch on stable coins later, and the competition with those. Stable coins are not bearer instruments, right? Holding them are not, possession, they're not control. They're representations of offline assets. Now, for the first time ever, the internet has money. Back in the original HTTP specs, there was a payment mechanism that was missing and never fulfilled. And now we have that. And the potential for what excites me is what that can actually do for global GDP and global commerce, that everyone in the world has access to an internet native money that is free of borders, free of control, free of companies, free of political influence, that everyone can use and transact with and conduct commerce with. And I think, I don't understand the full implications of that, just like I didn't with the internet and Uber and Amazon and Netflix back in the day. But that is something fundamentally new, fundamentally different, that is so much more exciting than just buy it and hold it and wait 10 years and put it in your 401k. Right? This is a fundamentally new and different piece. So it's a helpful analogy, gets you started, but don't end there. Don't be limited by that. And as Danny touched on, don't be limited by the prior attempts when things were super early and the technology was not there and the market was not there. Things are very, very different now, which we'll touch on as well.
So I think, as well, one of the key parts of this, and the internet is the easiest analogy, and we talk about that often, is the way that we now exchange information is radically different. And it's hard to fathom how easy it is now. And where we are today is incredibly early. If you just looked at the internet for exchanging information, what's the kind of way you can move information? And I think the movement of value needs to move at the speed of which information can now move. And with the adoption of Bitcoin and the integration within our day-to-day lives, look, a lot of you here today you're here for Bitcoin, but like, how do we get it to that next stage? Is that what we're trying to get to is everything's kind of here for us now. And if we can get all the stars are aligning very nicely so that when they talk about it just being an electronic transaction, that seamless element is here. Maybe 10 years ago when you looked at Microsoft with much fanfare, everyone wanted to be at the buzz, oh look, I've got that internet money, and then just kind of went, yo, see you later. But the technology wasn't there. And I use a crappy analogy, but I'm going to use it here. It's any of you video game fans thinking of like the Dreamcast, and that had online gaming. That was one of the first that had it. The market wasn't ready for it. And I think if you start looking at Bitcoin through that kind of lens, that 10 years ago we weren't ready for the things that we have today, the tech's caught up, the infrastructure's caught up, and that's what we kind of learned through the report. So kind of where we go with this now is why now, right? And excuse the crappy slides. You don't need to worry about them. I just put it up to remind myself where I'm at, because I could go and meander. But the technology is the key part of the whole of this picture, the ecosystem of which Bitcoin payments works, from the top to the bottom. And the kind of underlying part of this is Lightning. Now, I know some of you, I think you gentlemen there spoke about using Lightning in the last week. Lightning is what unlocks this. It allows Bitcoin payments to scale. The issues that they faced initially was the slow settlement time. You can't scale the number of payments. There are fundamental issues that meant Bitcoin on-chain didn't work. But Lightning is offering us a solution here in which we're still early. There are criticisms a lot of Lightning, and it was kind of oversold, is what we put forward in the report early. We've had 6 years of development. The tools are out, and Umi works very closely with some of those tools, is that we're bringing those tools now into products that fit your everyday life. And that means the exponential growth and time for Bitcoin payments is right now. And like I said, you see it quite often, don't you?
Yeah, so as Danny mentioned, what's really exciting, especially about the why now part, is that the stars have essentially aligned for the technology. A part of that being the Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin that allows Bitcoin to really be the peer-to-peer money that it was meant to be. The Lightning Network has Bitcoin remain as the bearer asset, but it allows it to flow a lot faster and cheaper. So we see that in this world right now where people want instant gratification with payments, tap to pay, immediate settlement. The Lightning Network has now come to a point in the technological advancements of the tools that allow apps and services to embed Lightning is also here. So we're really early, but right now is the tipping point where it's all going to start kind of forming to snowballing in motion.
Yeah, and then just to give it like a quick shout out to other attempts as well, like Lightning is by far the most mature, but we're also seeing an explosion within Bitcoin of other L2s as well. We've got Arc, we've got Spark, there's eCash, Cashew, Fedimint, and a bunch of side chains as well. So those are a lot earlier, so we're rightfully focusing on Lightning as the key technology that unlocks that. It is materially different from prior attempts that were used in the past. But we're also just want to highlight the amount of innovation that's now going on in Bitcoin, which is often seen as sort of a slow-moving, boring cryptocurrency compared to some of the others. But now that is no longer the case, and there's multiple different layer 2s that are focusing specifically on payments, on bringing stable coins to Bitcoin, and that story is changing as well. But Lightning really is where if you want to take Bitcoin payments today, the only game in town.
Yeah, and the way that you can kind of see it as well is that Lightning will connect those sub-networks as well. It's the common language of which it uses Bitcoin as the bearer asset, and those other networks can all be tied together using Lightning, which makes these developments super exciting for how this development furthers. And the reason that, kind of doubling down on my point here as well, is that the major players are integrating. It's not just a case of a couple of big companies have done it. Right now, hundreds of millions of people can be reached by Lightning. That's not me saying some kind of superlative just to say it. It's a fact. And it's not just cryptocurrency, so crypto companies. So if you look at Coinbase last year, integrated Lightning. Nubank in Brazil, huge neobank for anyone who's familiar with it, integrated Lightning. This is a transition of the technology into the mainstream. And yes, I know a lot of you are probably very impatient as well and kind of like, come on, time's up, hurry up. But the technology's taking time, and to Dan's point, things do move a little slower, but the technology is the foundation of which all of this moves forward. So if you look at the foundation we now have, is that we're reaching hundreds of millions of people with Bitcoin, and they have access to it far easier than they've ever had before, with a technology that can real-time settlement, lower fees, and can scale to the kind of capacity that we want, which is worldwide, right? There's 8 odd billion people on the planet. It's calmed down today. We're not saying that. I'm not putting a big 8 billion and then selling that to the world. But what I'm trying to say is we've got the technology to get there. So that's kind of the exciting part of where we start, is kind of why now, right? So first point being digital gold. It's a bit more than that. Second point being, cool, you're saying it's more than that, then why now? And this is where we got to, right?